I like opening these videos with a dumb joke, and today we're talking about doing God's work, which is perfect because I know a lot of jokes about unemployed people, but none of them work. Let's talk about it. Hey, New Lifers, welcome to week 6 of the 2019 Spring Life Group semester. Today we're going to go through the first half of Luke chapter 16, and we'll do the second half of that chapter next week. Last week was all about how Jesus made reaching lost people his top priority. This week we're going to learn about how money and how we manage money and resources that God gives us is so important to our spiritual growth. This section of Luke chapter 16 is a parable, a story that Jesus taught to his disciples and to a group of religious leaders, some Pharisees. And I taught about this story a few months ago, and I've had multiple people since then ask me for clarification about this story because it appears in the story that Jesus is advocating for dishonesty. And people have good reason to question this story. It's one of the hardest parables in the Bible to understand. It's a story about a rich guy who has a money manager who seems to be using his money dishonestly to save his own job. So today, I'd like for us to go through the story in a very unique way from what we normally do in life groups. I'd like for each of us to try to come to our own conclusions about what it means. So I'll read it out loud, but I think it'd be really helpful if you read it to yourself in your head while I read it out loud. And the story goes like this. Luke chapter 16. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. One day a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. So the employer called him in and said, "What's this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you are going to be fired." The manager thought to himself, "Now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches, and I'm too proud to beg. I know how to ensure that I'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired." So he invited each person who owed money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, "How much do you owe him, my employer?" The man replied, "I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil." So the manager told him, "Take the bill and quickly change it to 400 gallons. "And how much do you owe, my employer?" he asked the next man. "I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat," was the reply. "Here," the manager said, "take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it is true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of the light. Here's the lesson: to benefit others and make friends. Then when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home." So that's the story. So stop here, spend some time figuring out what it means. You can do that on your own, or you can use the answers that I've provided, and then push play. A key determinant that needs to be made in order to understand this parable is whether or not the money manager was in the right to decrease the debt that the people owed his boss. And I've heard smart Bible scholars make the case for both sides of this conversation. And you should know that this money manager lived with his boss, and losing his job meant losing his home, his income, his identity, his reputation, and probably everything else that he had spent his life accumulating. So when the boss gave him his 2 weeks notice of being fired, he thought, what can I do to make it so that I'm not homeless after I'm done in this job? If he was in the wrong when he reduced the debts, the boss would have been upset about it, but he respected him anyway. That would seem to imply that the story is admiring the sinful tactics that the world uses for personal gain. Let's look at verse 1 again. One day a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. People who interpret the story this way focus on the word report. In verse 1, that word is the Greek word diabolo. It can be better translated as accuse. This word is used other places to describe Satan as the accuser. And if he was in the right when he reduced the debts, it's probably because the rich man had been trying to get these people to pay him back for a long time, but he couldn't get them to pay him back. And if we are meant to think that the money manager was doing a good thing, that means that the money manager was able to find a way to get these people to pay his master when the master himself probably wasn't going to be able to get anything out of them. So back to verse 1. One day a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. So people who interpret this passage to imply that the manager was doing a good thing focus on the Greek word for wasting. That word is the same Greek word that is used to describe what the prodigal son did with his father's money. In other words, he probably wasn't stealing from his master, he just wasn't getting the job done. And the job he was probably failing to get done was getting the people who had borrowed the money from his master to actually pay their debts. But either way you interpret it, we get the same message at the end. Use money. Be shrewd in the way you use your money. In other words, don't let the world be better at making money than you are. Some of us have been given the spiritual gift of making lots of money. Our church has people in it who have business smarts and entrepreneurial smarts and creativity, and that leads to financial gain. If that's you, you have a very important role to play in the church, and you have been called to use your gifts for eternal purposes. For you to become who you were created to be means becoming kingdom-minded, focused on how you can use your gifts in a way that will last for eternity. When I taught on this passage last semester, I talked about how Jesus was saying your money is not only a tool, it's a test. How you handle your money is a test to see where your heart is. Will you use it to benefit others? It's not your money, it's God's money. So if we learn to give it away, we will be blessed. And I think there's even more to this passage than just that. Jesus did something in this passage that he didn't always do. He knew that it was going to be difficult for us to understand this one, so he interpreted it for us. Verse 9 says, here's the lesson: to benefit others and make friends. Then, when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. The key word here is eternal. This is about securing the home that we will have when we are no longer at home in this world. So whether or not we agree on the details of the story, we can obviously see what he was teaching. Invest in relationships that will last for eternity. Surround yourself with the body of Christ, with the church. And it mentions the one who will welcome you into your eternal home. And who is that? Who will welcome you into your eternal home? That's God. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 15 and 17 says, we who are still living when the Lord returns will not meet him ahead of those who have died. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. First, the Christians who have died will rise to their graves. Then, together with them, we who are still alive and remain on the earth will be caught up in the clouds with them to meet the Lord in the air. Then we will be with the Lord forever. And we look forward to that day. We invest in that day. We prepare for that day. So verse 9 is telling us that we should be generous to God, and he will be generous to us. This is a passage about eternity. It shows us the importance of being eternally focused, not focused on the things that we take so much time and attention to focus on in this world. Those things won't make a bit of difference in eternity. Are you preparing yourself now for the time when you will no longer have a home in this world? And who will welcome you into the next? So stop here, answer the last questions, and I will see you Sunday in church.